Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Perfect Pup podcast. We have Jocelyn with us today from Muttoneer Dog Training. And let me tell you, I am excited for today's topic. We are going to be diving into three dog/dog training myths and give you the factual opposites of those well-known myths. Plus, we're going to talk about kind of how you can talk to people who do spread these myths and just what the facts are. So thank you so much, Jocelyn, for coming on to the podcast today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to talk about these.
Me too. I really am. Before we dive in, I'm going to give a little bit of intro on Jocelyn for those of you who don't know her yet. So Jocelyn has been training and consulting with dogs, dog training, dog behavior for over 10 years. She has her CTC and her CPDT, kind of a mouthful there, but got it. She spent the majority of her career working with like the rehab of rescue dogs and many of those in difficult situations. And since 2018, she's been running her own dog training company called Muttoneer, based out of Los Angeles. And like I said, we're so excited to have you on here. Did I miss anything in your intro? Any like fun hobbies you want to mention, or like maybe you have a collection of stamps, something like that? I don't know.
Yeah, no stamp collecting, but just the typical LA dog mom life, hiking and, major focus on outdoorsy stuff. Yeah.
Nice. Awesome. So let's get right into it because I know people have heard these myths before. So we are going to, for lack of a better word, bust them. I know that's cliche, Mythbusters, whatever. We're going to do that though. So the first one, you've probably heard this a lot, listeners out there. Dogs are pack animals, and some behaviors occur because my dog is trying to be the alpha or the pack leader or to dominate me. First off, Jocelyn, why is that? Well, maybe even before, why is it incorrect? Why do you think people believe that? What is the reasoning behind people believing that or spreading that myth?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's just been around for so long and it's almost like folklore at this point that we kind of think like and I think that some of it comes from just like misunderstanding or lack of knowledge about our dogs and dog behavior. So we just kind of fall back on this like pack mentality kind of thing to explain behaviors that we're not really sure where they're coming from.
That makes sense. What are some of the behaviors that you see more commonly people kind of just go to, oh, it's because of alpha or because of pack mentality?
Yeah, I find it a lot with nuisance behaviors like maybe stealing food or jumping up. And then definitely I see this with dog to dog interactions. Maybe their dog likes to, mount or stand on top of other dogs that they meet. And then especially with aggression.
Interesting. So why is it dangerous? Why is that? I mean, you kind of touched on it where sometimes I think we use, if we're like, oh, we can't overcome it because it's just so ingrained in their behavior and it becomes kind of an excuse. But why else is this myth dangerous to believe as a pup parent?
Yeah, well, I think that a lot of times it does come down to a misunderstanding of the dog's behavior. So when we take, nuisance behavior, for example, a lot of those things, like dogs are opportunistic and they just do what works. So if we explain it more in those terms, then, we're not going to go to tools like shouting or throwing a penny can and, things like that. When we think that we have to kind of one up our dogs, we can get into that sort of mentality where we want to use force. But when we kind of understand where the behavior is coming from, then we can use things like management, teaching opposite actions, and things like that, where we're taking a more science-based approach. And then, of course, it's very dangerous to use kind of dominance theory applied to things like dog to dog interaction, aggression, and reactivity, because so many times that dog is upset, and that's really the reason why they're displaying those types of behaviors. And when we kind of throw force at a dog that is already scared, frustrated, upset, we can really exacerbate the issue, and it's also quite unkind. So instead we want to use, again, science-based approaches to really rectify the underlying cause of the behavior and use things like counter conditioning, so that the dog has like a whole different emotional reaction when he sees the things that were problematic to him.
I love that. So if I'm understanding you correctly, it's more important to understand the root of the behavior and why it's happening. Would that kind of be like a summation of what you just said? Understand the root of it?
Yeah, understand the root of it. And then, for everyday pet owner, they don't even really need to understand like exactly what's going on with the behavior. They can call a trainer in to help them with that, obviously a certified like force-free CPDT, or, somebody who has a lot of good education and experience behind them. But also just knowing that, beyond just understanding where the behavior is coming from, thinking more kind of goal oriented, like what do I want my dog to do instead?
Mm.
And that kind of gives them somewhere to aim for, instead of like, I don't want my dog to do this.
I love that. And I think for myself personally, as someone who's not a certified dog trainer, but I have 3 dogs, and being involved with Pupford for a while now, like realizing, okay, it's not just about figuring out what I don't want my dog to do, but what do I want them to do instead? That like kind of switch in my brain has made a huge difference for me. It's like, okay, I don't want my dog to crowd me while I'm feeding them, so I'm going to teach them to go to a place instead. And they're not trying to dominate me. They want their food. Of course they do. Like, I want food. If I'm at a buffet, I'm not going to like just sit and wait. Like, I want to go get it. That's, like you said, opportunistic.
Yeah, I love that. That's such a good example.
Awesome. So so if I'm a pup parent and I see these myths going around online, I think we all want to be nice people. We all want to be kind, but also at the same time, I think it is important to help people understand, hey, that might not be the best way to think about it. So like, how do you approach it? We talked a little bit about this before the recording, and we've touched on it, but if you have a client come to you, or someone in passing or on the internet, and they're, pushing this alpha theory and dominance, like what's been your best route for kind of gently explaining it to people why that might be dangerous?
Well, I think one thing that's really interesting to note is that the whole, kind of dominance theory with this linear, rigid hierarchy was done on outdated science back in the 70s. That's since been debunked by the scientist who did it. So he like said, oh, sorry, I did this research on captive male wolves, and
Mm.
therefore there was like a lot of stress in the animals and an increase in aggression. And the truth is that out in the wild, um, wolves will form what's more akin to like a nuclear family, with a mother and dad wolf pair on top, with prime access to resources because they're the ones hunting it. And then you have like the older litter, and then you have a sub litter that's youngest. So your dominance hierarchy really has a lot more to do with age, skills, ability, development, things like that, than it does kind of like the way that we kind of think about the pack mentality, with aggression being the thing that maintains order. And then also noting that like dogs aren't wolves. You
Mm.
wouldn't have a wolf living in your home.
Yep.
And so dogs have a totally different social hierarchy. It's not linear. They move away from their parents much, much faster than wolves do, because they develop much faster. We take them away at 8 weeks old.
Mm.
So, you're kind of applying the wrong animal to bad science. So, it's like, it doesn't work. So, you could explain it that way, just going really the scientific route, or just kind of, um, thinking, reframing things in a way of like, well, what would you rather your dog do instead? And could we use, kinder or less invasive ways to teach that behavior, teach that replacement behavior?
I love that. That's super important. And I think for me, like, and most pup parents can agree, our listeners can agree that like at the end of the day, I think we all just want to be kinder to our dogs. And yes, we get frustrated sometimes. And yes, there's these moments where we're like, oh my gosh, how am I going to deal with this land shark? But like, I think at our core, we want to love our dogs. We want to treat them well, and getting rid of that pack mentality and like that alpha mentality, I think really helps facilitate that. So that myth is busted. Again, dogs are opportunistic. Most of the behaviors that they're doing that you might think are like alpha, they're just opportunistic. They're trying to get something that is going to be good for them or get away from something that is going to be bad for them. So on to the next myth. I really love this one. This is something I've thought a lot about, the concept of it's better to get a puppy that has a clean slate versus a rescue dog because number one, you don't know their background. Number two, you don't know their training history, etc. So why is this a dangerous mindset to have?
Yeah, there's like kind of so much wrong with this one. And I heard it all the time when I was working in rescue. And, so this is kind of one that's near and dear to my heart. But, the truth is that when you get a puppy, that's a huge question mark. You don't know, there's nature and nurture. And you don't know a lot of times what mom and dad were like. And, so genetically that can be a question mark. Even if you do know who the parents are and, where that dog's coming from, still you have a huge job to rear that puppy into a confident dog. There's a lot of things that, and there's a lot of work that goes into that puppy to make sure that they grow up to be a good, well-balanced dog. Not to say that that can't happen, that can totally happen. But, if that's kind of the only thing that you're going on is, I want to make sure that I, have a clean slate so that I can make this dog into the dog that I want. You don't know that is good, that you have no guarantee with a puppy. But, if you need your dog to be like good with kids or X, Y, and Z, you can go to the shelter and get a dog that's been temperament tested, who's like 3 years old and their personality is kind of like set,
Mm.
and find that dog that's already good with X, Y, and Z instead of having to, make sure that you're putting all the work into the puppy who still could get scared and get a phobia of something that really need that dog to be good with. Um, so, shelter dogs, like, yeah, they might have a little bit of baggage, but they are who they are. You know what I mean? There's kind
Mhm.
of like less surprises when welcome a rescue dog into your life.
Yeah, that's something the more and more I learn about rescue organizations and ones that are quality rescues and shelters that are trying to do the right thing is they're going to give you as much information as they can about, if you come into them and say, hey, I have a health problem and I can't do a lot of exercise, or, yeah, I have 17 grandkids, like they're going to help you find a dog that is going to suit your needs. And I love that it's almost the opposite approach of this myth, right? Which is like, okay, you might have a clean slate with a puppy in theory, but yeah, you don't know what's going to happen to them. Whereas a rescue, you might actually have a better idea. They've reached adulthood. You know what their kind of best skills are and their not so good skills are. So for you, like with your extensive work in rescues, I think a lot of pup parents are nervous about rescuing dogs kind of because of this myth of like, again, you don't really know, like, what has been your kind of ideas, or, what do you recommend for people who are like, okay, I really want to get a rescue dog, but I'm nervous. Like, what can you help tell them to kind of push them over that, that fear of getting a rescue dog? Because I think there is some fear potentially that does come along with it.
Yeah, so there are like a couple different angles you could try with this. I would definitely go with, an organization that like you feel comfortable with. That seems like, I would make sure that they have a behavior staff, so that the dogs are getting temperament tested, so that you can get the most information about the dog ahead of time. So exactly like what you were saying, if you have this certain lifestyle and you're looking for a dog that's kind of plug and play, you can go to the rescue and say like, I need these types of things. These are the types of activities I like to do on the weekends. And they can, guide you towards a couple of options that might fit your lifestyle as is. Um, and then also fostering is a really
Mm.
great avenue just to give it a try. Like, what is it like bringing an adult dog into my home? And, try it out. And there's nothing wrong with a foster failure too if you end up falling in love.
Hmm. I like it. So one last thought on this myth, and I think most people have, it's more well intentioned than maybe the pack mentality. And but how, again, that same question we had previously of, if people are talking about this, or if you come across people who, just say like, no, I'll never get a rescue, because I need a puppy, I need a clean slate. What Can you reiterate a little bit more, like how puppies can still be a question mark? I kind of want to just drive that point home. Could you reiterate a little bit more on that and elaborate on just like what might happen with a puppy?
Yeah, well, I mean, puppies, you're like guaranteed that you're going to have to do a ton of legwork with them. And some people are totally on board with that, but some people don't realize how much work it is. You have to potty train them, you have to house train them, you have to teach them what they can chew on and what they can't chew on. They need a ton of exercise. They need so much. And then on top of that, they need socialization on a regular basis. Um, so yeah, it's a lot of work. And, again, a puppy is not a guarantee. You don't know, how hard that puppy's going to hit their adolescence. Some
Mm,
dogs kind of breeze through it. Other dogs are a nightmare. And it's just like the dog's personality, and you're kind of stuck with all those different developmental stages. As a trainer, I would much rather get an adult dog that I kind of know needs, a little bit of work in this area, but overall has like a shining personality. I would much rather have that and kind of know what I'm in store for than, having to do kind of all the legwork of raising a puppy.
interesting. I really like that. It made me think too. So I have two Labradors. They're not so much puppies anymore. They're three and like almost four. They came from the same mom and dad, different litter, and we actually got them as puppies. And it is crazy though how different they are personality wise. I mean, we they grew up in the same home. We raised them mostly the same. Obviously, we were learning and finding out new techniques. But the one of our labs is like perfect with recall, you know, isn't reactive, but has other problems. Like she has some joint issues, whereas our, the other lab, no health issues, but somewhat reactive, not the best with recall. So I love that point that like even with puppies, it still takes an extremely concerted effort to just raise a dog. It's super, super hard. So I love that. The third myth, let's get to it. My dog, this one, okay. First, I'm gonna like preface this with we've probably all seen those videos that get circulated on Facebook, and it's like, check out these guilty dogs, and like people think it's amazing, and I think it's weird. Let's talk about it, right? Okay, so the myth is my dog knows when they've done something wrong. They totally look guilty. Is this real? Do dogs know guilt?
No, no, they don't.
It's that simple,
Um,
right?
no, they don't. So yeah, your dog is like not, they have no concept of a moral compass, right? Like that is so unfairly anthropomorphizing the dog. So, putting human characteristics on it. As soon as we start to say stuff like he knows he did something wrong, or she looks guilty, or, any of those types of things, like she knows the difference between right and wrong, we're opening ourselves up to, well, then she needs to be punished,
Mm.
right? And we don't want to do that. And it's false. They don't have a moral compass. They just don't have that capacity intellectually.
So what is that look then? Because sometimes, right, when I come home and maybe my dog did do something wrong, they chewed up my new table, and they do seem to have like a different look about them. Like, what is that?
Yeah, so if you look up or Google scared dog or sad dog, you get a lot of this, and then you maybe put that next to guilty dog, they look really, really similar.
Mm.
um, what you're getting is, a shade of fear, or, even if you wanted to say sad. Um, but really what it is it's an appeasement gesture. It's kind of a sign of submission, if you want, if you want to put that into body language terms. But basically they're responding to your body language because you, their owner, who they love and are bonded with, you appear upset. And so they're trying
Mm.
to turn that down. They're like, bring that down a notch, human. Not really sure why you're so upset. And so they're, making themselves small, putting their ears back, giving you puppy eyes. So they're just showing you that, they're acknowledging that you're
Huh.
upset.
So most of the time or all the time, it's based off of our own feelings and emotions that our dogs pick up on and want to, in their only way that they know how, say, because they can't talk to us, unfortunately, they want to say, hey, I don't know what you're upset about, but like, I won't do anything else. Like, I'll be better. Am I understanding
Right.
that right?
Yeah, kind of like, if we're intimidated by an authority figure, we can kind of slink back and make ourselves a little small. It's just appeasement, right? So
Mm.
even if there's not really quite an understanding or a link between an immediate, behavior that just happened, they're just keying off our body language and our energy. If we're like upset and, doing like that, then that's their response to us.
So if I do come home and my dog did chew on my table, which is an insanely precise example that I'm using because it did happen. It was a long time ago. We've recovered. But like, what do you do? Because as a pup parent, it's hard, right? Like it is very frustrating. It is very difficult. And I don't know, like what do you recommend to people for like how to kind of reset, I guess, and calm down and approach it from a more, okay, why did this happen? How do I solve it? What's your advice for that?
Yeah, well, whatever you do to decompress, if that's meditate or go for a walk or eat a snack or like whatever you need to do. So, you can like re-enter like cool, calm, and collected, which is kind of how you should always be in front of your dog, right? We don't want to, argue in front of our dogs. That kind of stuff is quite scary. And especially if it's directed at the dog, we want to avoid that kind of stuff. But the real kind of take home is when you come home to some sort of accident, whether it's a big potty accident or your couch is all chewed up, that's just information for you, that your dog is not ready for that level of freedom. So you need to kind of do a better job with management, or, maybe providing more enrichment so your dog's not like bored and kind of searching for outlets. So that sort of thing. Think about it more as information, because you can't kind of give your dog any feedback once the behavior has occurred. 30 minutes, 2 hours ago, they won't really put it together.
I mean, the window is like mere seconds, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
absolutely.
I'm glad we could dispel this myth because I think, like, I was going back to my original thing about the Facebook videos, social media doesn't help with this. They just propel it. And like some, like people think it's funny or cute or whatever. And I get it. It's social media. But at the same time, I think that's like a good general recap for this entire podcast episode is not everything you read online, especially not everything you see on social media, is correct and factual. It's important to, get our beliefs, I guess you could say, from scientific sources, consult professional trainers like yourself to just really understand what is happening. I have one kind of last follow up question or like wrap up question, you could say. Of all like the myths that you hear, or I mean, specifically about the ones that we've discussed, if you could have people walk away from this episode with one thing they're going to remember, what would it be? I know it's kind of a tough question.
Yeah, I mean, I think you did such a good job of summing it up. I think, really kind of the main thread that we discussed is, instead of just jumping to punishment or blaming the dog, think about, as an owner, how you can manage your dog better. And if there's a behavior that's just driving you crazy, what could you replace it with? What would you rather your dog do in that moment? And then train it.
Hmm. Simple. I love it. It's way easier said than done, but the concept is 100% spot on. So thank you so much, Jocelyn, for coming on. I enjoyed this episode. I hope our listeners did as well. I'm going to, in our show notes, or if you're watching on YouTube or wherever you are, there will be links to connect with Jocelyn if you would like on Instagram. We'll throw on her website, maybe a Facebook. We'll put it all in there. If you want to connect with her, she's a great trainer. We've loved working with her here at Pupford. All of her information will be in the links in the show notes. So thank you so much again, Jocelyn, for coming on to this episode.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
And wherever you're listening / watching, please do all those things. Like, subscribe, leave us a review. We read them all. I really do. I'm personally looking into the camera and telling you I read all the comments, all the reviews. So let us know how you like this episode, and we will catch you on the next episode.